Hello everyone, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you as always. Today we are talking State of our Union. Joe Biden has a speech. We will give you the full breakdown and a pretty interesting and pretty exhaustive piece from one of my new favorite newspapers. You could say I'm getting a little bit, anglicized, but it's okay. The Financial Times has a deep dive on can Joe Biden win back America? It's a question that we're going to try and answer by delving into the piece. Also, a very important and also really kind of sad story happening right now that we're going to want to break down. A rift, you just want to be, why can't you just be okay? A rift has opened up in Bolivia's movement for socialism party. We'll break that down. A piece in Jacobin on that as well. So it's going to be very, very important stuff today. Also, we will talk about obviously the latest going on in Gaza. So with that being said, we're going to get right to it. All right, so we start with this in the State of the Union. We're going to go by the kind of Democratic hack, Aaron Rupar, who I think he just does a Substack, but he's best known also for kind of just clipping various things, which makes it very helpful for me because I just have just a bunch of these kind of all pulled clips on Twitter that could just go through and play. So Biden starts off with the State of the Union comments about democracy at home and abroad, which is, is very interesting. You could just see in kind of the order that he talked about, he just led with his best issues first, which does kind of make sense and would be pretty effective for a normal president. But the situation was, by the time he was talking, about his worst issues like immigration and Gaza, he was trailing off, some of the meds, the Dr. Feelgood stuff that he was clearly on, especially in the beginning, had started to wear off a bit. And yeah, so you can start to see that. But here's how he started off. I think it's important to play the State of the Union.
1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation. And he said, I address you at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this was no ordinary time. Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not.
So yeah, that's kind of starting off with the comparison to Ukraine. I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing because it is his best issue, and I think it does play to a certain extent of making him look, kind of competent, making him look strong, making him look like that experienced statesman that his team definitely does want him to be. Kamala, of course, standing up and clapping, but no clapping for Speaker Mike Johnson when it comes to Ukraine. It's not going to be, I think, really a motivating issue. If anything, I think the best thing it could do for Biden is just play into this issue, the kind of competency concern and the cruelty concern. We've talked about this on the show. There's two kind of drains on his support. It will help, I think, with the competency concern if he does show, we are handling Ukraine, we need to continue to handle Ukraine, and because it is important. I feel like the reality of Ukraine, the situation, and just how viscerally people feel it has trailed off to where even some of the most strongly committed, pot-committed MSNBC Democrats are not going to be thinking about that when they go to the ballot box. I would honestly say doing more of an allusion to January 6th coming out of the gate would have been more effective, especially with Mike Johnson sitting behind him and the way the party is currently situated at that point, especially with the House GOP, which is really, really interesting. A lot of interesting calls going on around, a lot of interesting, because we see it all the time, the politics of do you stand, do you clap, do you stand and clap? And Republicans did not stand when Biden made this call for Congress to protect IVF.
History is watching another assault on freedom. Joining us tonight is Latoya Beasley, a social worker from Birmingham, Alabama. 14 months ago, she and her husband welcomed a baby girl thanks to the miracle of IVF. She scheduled treatments to have that second child, but the Alabama Supreme Court shut down IVF treatments across the state, unleashed by a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. She was told her dream would have to wait. What her family had got through should never have happened. Unless Congress acts, it could happen again. So tonight, let's stand up for families like hers. To my friends across the aisle, don't keep this waiting any longer. Guarantee the right to AVF.
We're seeing, the full Democratic side clapping there.
Guarantee it nationwide.
The woman who he's referencing sitting next to Joe Biden and Mike Johnson sitting down with kind of a smirk on his face. But yeah, I think this is probably just another instance of just not wanting to give Biden a win here. We have Trump essentially coming out in favor of IDF. Or sorry, I keep saying IDF, but IVF. And just pretty much settling it, in today's Republican Party. If Trump's for it, you got to be for it. End of story. And I think it's kind of becoming more and more clear how kind of off the reservation the GOP, the Alabama Supreme Court was with this, because we even have the Alabama GOP, obviously GOP controlled House of Representatives and state government. They are passing a bill currently to try and protect IVF and to try and enshrine it within the law there more and more effectively. So it's not something that's going to be the Democrats will not be able to benefit off the Republicans making a negative case for IVF in this election. But there is another person or another group of people in the room that he had a bit of a problem with, and here he is talking to the Supreme Court, who, remember, are in attendance, sitting in the first row of this speech on the House floor, talking to them about Dobbs and abortion.
And with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that.
So the justice is kind of sitting there stony-faced.
Clearly.
And probably something that even for Biden as an institutionalist, definitely something that it kind of pained him to have to do to go after the Supreme Court. And you can see some of the kind of the old age, Bidenism situation, just him kind of getting drowned out by his muffling, by the cheers of where he was trying to go, and kind of botching that line, not really exactly sticking the landing. He would have had a great moment there. I think a really motivating moment for the Democratic base, and a lot of people were pissed as hell at the Supreme Court justices right now if he had come up and said, absolutely been able to stick that landing. But then you see, you get a little bit of that reminder. The thing that's always in the back of your mind whenever you see Biden speaking for longer than 10 seconds is, this guy's old. He is not sounding good. He's sounding very just unfirm. He's not able to stick the landing on this at all. And you see it time and time again. You see it here.
Those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out. When reproductive freedom was on the ballot, we won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024.
It's like Blinken and Austin and Merrick Garland who are kind of up clapping. But you have, of course, the justices seated.
American people
decidedly
send
so.
me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you.
So, I think it's also interesting here to take a look at Biden's touting of the economic record.
Folks, my inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world. 15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record. Unemployment at 50-year lows. A record 16 million Americans are starting small businesses, and each one is a literal act of hope. With historic job growth and small business growth for Black and Hispanics and Asian Americans, 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America and counting. Where is it written we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? We are, and we will. More people have health insurance today. More people have health insurance today than ever before. The racial wealth gap is as small as it's been in 20 years. Wages keep going up. Inflation keeps coming down.
Yeah, so that's, Biden kind of highlighting some of the economic stats. I kind of do believe he should continue because I think it's more and more likely that the economy is going to continue to get better. And there has been some genuinely impressive things he's done with the IRA in terms of, this is the constant situation that we have with the Democratic Party. It's like it could have done 10 times better if he had just been stronger, if he had been more confident, if he had been unwilling to and unable or actually able to fight back against the political BS of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and it took him, longer than the first half of his presidency to do so. I think, it could have been a lot better, could have been a lot more effective, could have been a lot more unimpeachable, and just also, I think failing to stick up for that incredibly influential, incredibly powerful COVID welfare state, the child tax credit being chief among one of the things that was lost for about a year. After it was created, that really gave economic support to a lot of families, and that was obviously taken away pretty quickly, and it was a pretty devastating effect for a lot of people, and it's something that they're still feeling and calculating, in addition with the high price rises and all that stuff, but the soft landing strategy has been really incredible and effective, and we do see some sense of rationality coming from the Fed finally in terms of getting them to slow down these interest rates, take a little bit of pressure off the economy, and realize that things are actually going in the way that they should be going. And we're also starting to see some of the consumer sentiment going up, and if that narrative can change, it's probably Biden's best hope coming to the election. But the very rational thing is, a lot of people, if they see a raise at work, wages have been, they're growing faster than inflation. They have been for 2 to 3 years right now, especially on the lower end of the spectrum. But they've been stagnating for so long. People, very justifiably so, are attributing that to the fact that, hey, my work has finally got through. My boss is respecting me. My boss is giving me a raise, and that is something that, is really becoming, I think, is kind of probably hurting Biden politically. But if he does kind of continue to those signs, emphasize the stability, emphasize the kind of the steady hand that he has had, and actually do it in a convincing way, the steady hand that he has had in terms of pulling the economy, as he said, kind of back from the brink. It was not really, in a good position. And I think it wasn't really, too much of what Trump did that got it from the brink. I mean, he did some kind of COVID stimuluses in the same way that Joe Biden did. I think probably the most detrimental thing he did was the tax cut to the rich, with 83% of the benefits going to the rich. But he can try and make that case more and more effective as the numbers continue, I think, to stabilize. Which again, it sounds stupid to say this, but seem to be doing pretty well at the same time. So yeah, so this is the kind of continuing down through here. We have just a Biden mocking them and calling out shrinkflation, which I think when it comes from Biden, it seems a little bit corny, but I think it's something that Americans would feel kind of mad about. Just the Aaron Rupar captions on this are a little bit ridiculous. He tries to go, Biden does for the abortion, or sorry, not the immigration situation. They pin in on James Lankford, which is the guy who negotiated this quote unquote bipartisan bill where he gives the Republicans everything he wants, the biggest concessions in history that Democrat has ever made on the border. And the Republicans obviously laugh in his face and don't pass it. They keep it as an issue. It's just, again, a politically completely foolish strategy because, again, they would never give him that credit in the first place. The Republican voters, they just do not trust Joe Biden, period, end of story. And the liberal voters, who are, by the way, a little bit pissed at him at the moment, they now trust him even less, and they know he's even more full of shit because he was talking back during the campaign about how awful it was. One of the things that inspired him to run was Donald Trump's family separation policy. And now here he is building on not just the family separation policy, but the entire regime of viewing migrants as an invasion, and just this whole just anti-migrant framework of policy, and just perspective of the border situation in general that has contributed so much to the just degradation of the policy window, the Overton window on the border that he is completely 100% responsible for with his administration. And you see Republicans kind of booing, and you see Democrats getting some big applause for doing this about the border. This was kind of an interesting moment here. Let's take a listen to this. This is Marjorie Greene yelling about Laken Riley, And Biden responded with some pretty hardline rhetoric, as Aaron Rupar puts it, about undocumented immigration.
Not really.
So here, that's good old Marjorie talking about Lincoln Riley, and you'll find out who she was in a minute.
Lincoln Riley.
Lincoln
an
Riley.
Young woman who was killed
instead of Lincoln Riley
by an illegal. That's right. But how many of thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand. But look, if we change the dynamic at the border, people pay these smugglers $8,000 to get across the border because they know if they get by and let into the country, it's 6 to 8 years before they have a hearing. And it's worth taking the chance of the $8,000. But if it's only 6 weeks, the idea is it's highly unlikely that people will pay that money and come all that way knowing that they'll be able to be kicked out quickly. Folks, I would respectfully suggest...
Again, talking about kicking out people quickly, like this is the end of any sort of positive case for migrants in American politics, and just the fact that they make our country better, the fact that, we have them committing crimes at much less of a rate than Americans, and I think that people should get a chance to prove that they can be, positive impacts to this country, as many, 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 many migrants are. And I think that the fact that this is just, not even part of a situation saying, I'm not going to demonize immigrants, saying they're poisoning the blood of our country. I'm not going to separate. Again, he already has. I will not ban people because of their faith. Again, trying to draw that contrast between him and Donald Trump. But then, of course, by the end here, we get Israel, and we just see talking. This is what he had to say about Hamas.
Among the civilian population, like cowards, under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like.
With no evidence.
Though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war Israel has.
Yeah, so showing no real effort, no real inclination towards doing this in the first place. We again, after just a complete blockade, a complete siege for months and months and months on Gaza, and just Israel being like, no, we're not letting any of it in. We're going to just sit by and just literally thumb our noses towards the international community and towards the U.S., particularly when they were saying, hey, can we just get at least a little aid in, and just, giving Biden all these problems, and Biden not really caring too much to, do anything about them, and then just, complete and utter, just unadulterated Israeli propaganda about Hamas at the moment. This is how he closed out.
Let me close with this. Yay. I know you don't want to hear any more, Lindsay, but I got to say a few more things. I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever. I know the American story. Again and again, I've seen the contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of our nation. Between those who want to pull America back to the past and those who want to move America into the future.
So yeah, kind of just going in there for his big closing remarks. But anyway, it was definitely kind of looking at this situation more broadly. We kind of talked a little bit, kind of skipped over his announcement of this, you know what, let's just play it here, before we do our kind of just lasting takeaway. And by the way, huge shout out to the squad on this. They sat for the chance of 4 more years. They came all wearing keffiyehs, and they had signs saying, lasting ceasefire now, stop sending weapons, all of that. They were not looking happy, and they were... it was just filling my heart to see in every way somebody standing and representing for the vast majority of the Democratic base who is absolutely horrified with this man and what he has enabled, just this complete backing of complete and utter genocide on the people of Gaza with no preconditions towards Israel. Here's the clip.
The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight,
You tell he's getting tired here as
the U.S.
well.
military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. And they're announcing they're going to...
Or just blatantly shot.
...have a crossing in northern Gaza. To the leadership of Israel, I say this. Humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be
just
priority.
Stupid rhetoric at a time where he knows a lot of people are just not even paying, or a lot of people are paying attention to just emptying meaningless rhetoric that he has no just plans of following through on, no plans of pushing into it, and just when he knows a lot of people are watching him. So just very kind of cynical political moves there. Probably, though, Biden hitting a lot of, the right stuff, getting a little bit of a peek of his campaign messages, sticking with probably his two top issues, which is kind of the craziness of the Republican Party and Ukraine. I think you're just highlighting the craziness of the Republican Party, highlighting, all the things that people didn't like about Donald Trump is going to be his best bet. And maybe the second best bet is an outside chance the economy improves. And, he should probably keep highlighting that too for people to continue to feel it, in the hope that people would continue to feel it and continue to see those consumer sentiments improving in the run up to the election as hopefully unemployment and things like that stay low and wages kind of continue to keep pace with inflation. And yeah, we've seen some pro-act shout-outs, some shout-outs to Sean Fain, but of course, Gaza, little thing he just tossed away at the end there, which was pretty interesting. By the way, having to avoid pro-Palestinian protesters on the entrance to the speech, taking the long way in apparently. Just kind of tossing that in the end, just no big deal. But as it still continues to play a massive role in the space and a massive reason why the Democratic Party is faltering so much. We'll just do a little bit of piece here from the Financial Times here. Even if Biden does pivot to the offensive, polls show he has a lot of ground to make up on key issues there, right? Despite the success of his economic policies in creating a strong labor market recovery, the pain of high inflation is giving him low marks with the U.S. public on the handling of the economy. And the recent rebound in consumer sentiment is not translated into credit for the White House. Voters are gilding the lily about Trump, said Matt Bennett, former Clinton aide and co-founder of Third Way, a center-left, that's putting it generously, think tank. They are forgetting all of the things that were terrible about Trump the first time, and they're remembering the economy was doing pretty good before the pandemic. Trump benefits enormously from people's faulty memory about that period. Yeah, they just don't remember what was going on in their lives. 3 years, I guess, was it 5 years ago now, like in the pre-COVID 2019 era, because we're just about to be approaching like 4 years since the start of COVID. Like it is just like the really, I think people do kind of remember and they get the sense that there is, I think, the COVID stuff kind of gets taken out, but the thing is no economy not doing too bad, no new wars. I think those two key fundamental points are a very, very big deal. Meanwhile, despite the support for the bipartisan border security bill, Biden's handling of immigration remains a major liability as long as the number of people crossing the Mexican border keeps rising illegally, which I think is, or illegal keeps rising, which I think is a little bit of a misnomer there by the Financial Times, because you look at this issue, A, a lot of people voting on immigration, you're never going to get to vote for Joe Biden, and B, it's because you're not putting up any, response to the completely political creation of the issue of immigration that always seems to pop up right around the time of an election. It'll be covered on Fox News, and you get this feedback loop, this kind of people have talked about it in a lot of different ways about people not wanting to seem too liberal. Oh, what can we criticize Biden on? We can criticize him on immigration. Biden, meanwhile, has no real response to that, no effective response to that, essentially comes in and just said, yeah, folks, it is a crisis. This is not good. This is not great. This is not great, man. And then just essentially it's all over. And people are like, yeah, why aren't you doing anything about this crisis that you admit is a crisis? So again, there's a lot of problems for Biden throughout But, we have the Ukraine war, which I think people just say, he's looking strong. He's standing up to Putin. Kind of give him a broad thumbs up for that. But Biden's backing for Israel's war in Gaza has turned into a political problem for him in several swing states. The most serious is Michigan, a critical battleground state in November, where 100,000 people this month voted uncommitted on their Democratic ballots rather than for the president. Abdul Hamid, mayor of Michigan city of Dearborn, which has a heavy concentration of Palestinian Americans, says that he's not sure what, if anything, could make those voters revert to Biden in time for the election. They're looking for a significant shift on Gaza. Some are looking for a permanent, lasting ceasefire. Some are looking for military aid. There's a large breadth of opinion on what it would take, but he says they're looking for change today. Also, he would be, again, I apologize, he was 82, he's 82 now, he'd be 86 by the end of the second term. His age has become a constant source of fodder for public Republican attacks, but also, 86% is also the number of people that say he's too damn old to finish a second term. So there's a lot of problems for Joe Biden that we all kind of know about. And will continue to shape this election. All right, we spent a lot of time on this. We do want to switch gears a little bit to this situation going on in Bolivia. This is in Jacobin, taking us to the situation in Bolivia at the moment. It's Carnival, which is nice, but incense was burned, cocoa leaves and alcohol were offered to Pachamama, which is Mother Earth, in the kind of indigenous language, and rituals affirming bonds of reciprocity between people and Pachamama. But in addition to the unwelcome festival shaki, or hangover, a deepening political and social rift is adding to the headache of the left and progressive movements in Bolivia, which are some of the most, really most impressive and strong out there. Since the movement towards socialism returned to power under Luis Arce, ex-president Evo Morales has been honing his support base with hope of returning as president. But in December last year, Bolivia's plurinational constitutional court ruled that presidents can only hold power for a maximum of 2 terms, and the indefinite re-election is not a human right. The ruling dealt a catastrophic blow to the presidential ambitions of thrice-elected Morales. So this is somebody who really kind of built this modern-day Bolivia, taking it from a place that was largely just controlled by the same people that used to colonize it to a place that actually, when he was elected in the early 2000s, it says plurinational for a reason and incorporates the indigenous community. It essentially redid the Constitution. It built an incredibly much more equal, incredibly massive transformation for the rights of indigenous people in Bolivia, and just the general social equality of the place, and has turned the economy, still well-functioning economy, into a much more egalitarian economy as well. And essentially, really framing it in terms of one of the most human rights-minded courts in the nation, has consistently said that he is not, eligible for re-election, but it's just somebody who has been in power for so long. It's just, the classic humanitarian case of or a human nature case of just not knowing when to, call it quits here. Morales has accused Arce, his former economy minister and close ally, of orchestrating an attempt to outlaw him from holding office, declaring on X, formerly Twitter, that a judicial coup is underway to force elections for a new judiciary, which should have been held in December in accordance with the plurinational constitution. In late January, Morales mobilized his base in the cocoa-growing heartland of Cochabamba to form bloqueos, or roadblocks, along the roads connecting Cochabamba to the business hub of Santa Cruz. The blockades combining, which, by the way, it's incredibly effective, just unified and organized social movement normally, and Morales did play a major role in this, between the indigenous people out in the rural areas and the industrial workers of the cities. The blockades, combining demands for judicial elections with other local grievances, have caused food and fuel shortages and have been suppressed by security forces. Huasca Salazar, an economist and member of the Centro Estudios Populares in Bolivia, says there is little hope of conciliation between the two camps. What we are experiencing at this moment is an arm twist in which Evo and Arce dispute the acronym of Movement Towards Socialism, and especially the candidacy for the presidency of that party for 2025. He adds that a problem is that the arm twist is having tremendous consequences for grassroots organizations, which have been increasingly divided in their internal structures, but also because the dispute occurs in the midst of increasingly palpable economic crisis of which no one wants to take charge. The dramatic increase in blockades this month have, as well as their geographical distribution, can be seen in infographics produced by Mauricio Fonda, an open data activist living in Bolivia. And it is very, very interesting to see how these play out. and they are coming, showing again the incredible power of an organized kind of indigenous core here. And we can see some of the geographic distribution kind of centered around the major cities: La Paz, Cochabamba, Santa Cruz, all that stuff. In the plurinational legislative assembly, MAS elected officials are split between Arcistas and Evista lines. Election for judiciaries were supposed to be held last year, but have stalled due to disagreement over the pre-selected candidates agreed on by the legislative assembly, which is dominated by the MAS. In Bolivia, judges on the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, the Agro-Environmental Court, and the Judicial Court are selected through direct elections every 6 years. The Arcistas gain from the status quo because the current makeup of the plurinational Constitutional Court has favored their interests, such as the recent ruling over Morales' selection. And Arce's status as an incumbent gives him far more leverage over state institutions, which he has used to his advantage. The reselection of Morales has been an unsettled question since 2017, and really, as you can remember, lay at the heart of the coup in 2019. The Constitution prohibits anyone from serving as president for more than 2 consecutive terms. Morales narrowly lost a referendum in 2016, which would have overturned the Constitution and allowed him to run again. He took the decision to the plurinational Constitutional Court, which was, at the time, packed with his supporters. It ruled that re-election was a human right and effectively overturned the referendum. Kind of in that kind of human right framing, which is very, very interesting. And again, something that he helped set up. Many Bolivians view this as an anti-democratic legal charade and was a major factor in mobilizing the urban middle classes and disaffected social movements against Morales in October 2019, and then led up to the far-right evangelical psychopath Janine Áñez to seize the presidency. The recent kind of blockades are an indicator that Morales can still mobilize a broad, motivated base. Blockades have been long and effective history in Bolivia and are a feature of many social conflicts. In 1999, the Cochabamba Water Wars, a coalition of peasants, factory workers, and community activists, united to barricade the roads in response to a new neoliberal law that would have privatized water. Similarly, after a violent coup by Luis Garcia Mesa in the 80s, peasants blocked the roads to prevent the military from moving through the countryside, incurring a serious repressive response. More recently, in 2020, it was a big part of how they got another election, forcing Áñez to hold elections. And when there is a blockade, when they really are not allowed to let anything go through, it could be a really, really big deal. So, and on top of all this, we have explosions of the party from Luis Arce and his number 2, David Choquechana. I'm definitely not saying that right, but I apologize. And a looming devaluation of the local currency crisis to improve the dollarization of the economy. Is that the IMF's music? That would be a real tragedy to see in Bolivia, but it's going to be really, really important for just hopefully Morales seeing some sense here and just kind of getting behind and just really mobilizing the incredible, there's no place like it in the entire world. The way that they have the one-in-one relationship between the poorer industrial workers in the cities and the indigenous rural kind of farmer kind of rural people, and that has been in the miners as well. Like, it's just a complete and 100% unification of the kind of proletarian forces of Bolivia, and it really is incredible to see, and it is what gave them and kept them there, restored their democracy. So hopefully it is able to restore socialist power and enshrine socialist power in the future in that state. All right, now quickly here to our last story, and it is, of course, as always, we continue to follow the situation in Gaza. A U.S. President Joe Biden, the only one, announced that he would be building a temporary pier in Gaza to allow the maritime corridor to let humanitarian aid in. But dozens of humanitarian aid and NGO groups argue that this is neither practical nor ethical, particularly given how many aid trucks are waiting to get into Gaza at the Rafah crossing. Where has this American conscience been for 153 days since the beginning of the war, as people in the Gaza Strip are under constant bombardment? So said Salah Al-Hams, a doctor of nursing at Gaza European Hospital, telling Al Jazeera, pointing out the hypocrisy that on taking weeks to build, the port itself would be very close to the Rafah crossing, where hundreds of trucks were literally waiting for permission to enter with aid that has been there for a long time. If you want to use the military, if you want to use them to, kind of flex your muscles to do something in any way powerful, just say, roll up, say, you know what, sorry, Egypt, we're letting these things in. And I think, honestly, Egypt wouldn't mind it. It would be Israel that they'd probably have to be apologetic. Like, that would represent a massive way of standing up to Israel. I mean, honestly, I had said in the past, almost as a joke, that they would be, that'd be like the least thing that they could do is make this kind of roll up to the Mediterranean Sea and put this stuff in there. But again, especially when you have this, I kind of, at a certain point, did expect them to do it because of how bad the political pressure was and still is in this election year. But it is by no means, it's definitely something that in some ways makes Israel a little bit uncomfortable, but is by no means a way of getting enough aid in there. Especially, it's a spit in the face here. It's a point that I honestly didn't even consider when I was making these comments on past shows about all the people lined up at the Rafah crossing waiting for months to get in. And it is a much, kind of more practical and consistent and easier way of getting aid in long term. Since Israel's bombardment across the Gaza Strip continue, since then, just last night, bombings in Rafah, Deir al-Balah, and Gaza City killed 12 civilians, bringing the total number of deaths to 78 people killed in the past 24 hours alone. A number of victims are still under the rubble and on the roads, as the occupation prevents ambulances and civil defense crews from reaching them. The Gaza Health Ministry said in a statement, pointing out the official casualty numbers do not include the number of people who are still missing and suspected to be trapped under the rubble. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has reviewed the February 29th flower massacre, where Israeli troops opened fire on Palestinians waiting for a humanitarian convoy, killing more than 100 people, and concluded, wait for this, that soldiers only opened fire on people who were engaged in a stampede and threatening the soldiers. The command review found that the IDF army troops did not fire at the humanitarian convoy, but did fire at a number of suspects who approached the nearby forces and posed a threat to them. Read the statement. They're calling these people suspects. Just like, it cannot get any more just stereotypical. It cannot get more just, shock troops. It cannot get any more just reminiscent of all these genocides past that we have seen. The Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs has rejected these claims, pointing towards the gunshot wounds the victims presented at the hospital, pointing towards more direct attacks, and demanding independent and impartial investigation. I mean, honestly, I don't, this is from the same people that didn't get an autopsy of their leader, so you're not going to suspect, a lot of good here from the PA in terms of actually effectiveness on this issue. Really not a surprise at all there, but it's just a joke. It's like, we call for a serious independent investigation. It's really ridiculous. Meanwhile, new settlements have been approved by Israel, and Joe Biden has called for focusing on foreign policy, as we talked about during the State of the Union address, with pro-Palestinian protesters outside. All right, that's all we got for you guys today. We will be back on Monday.